Let's now speak to SABC News International Editor Sophie Mokoena, who joins us live now. Sophie, before we even talk about what's taking place in Senegal, let's touch on briefly on this significant development in the UN Security Council.
I think it's an important move, as Sharon pointed out. The Secretary of State of the United States of America has been on a charm offensive, diplomatic charm offensive in the Middle East, trying to persuade all stakeholders to ensure that they agree to a process that will lead to a ceasefire. And now this resolution, it will actually put pressure on the stakeholders, particularly Hamas and Israel, to continuously engage and finally come up with an agreement, or the ceasefire agreement. And also you have the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who has been there on the ground, and every day he's having a media briefing and giving updates in terms of what's happening on the ground. And it is so embarrassing for the international community, particularly the allies of Israel, because you have now the UNSG giving live reports in terms of the situation there. And therefore, I think this is a moment where the whole world must really ask hard questions in terms of what the leaders of the world have been doing.
And let's turn our attention now to Senegal, another critical story that we have been, covering here as the SABC, especially given the significant developments that led to this moment as far as the election is concerned. But just a short while ago, you and I learning that the government coalition candidate has conceded defeat, congratulating his rival. A number of people were predicting a rerun. Let's talk about the significance that is this moment.
The Electoral Commission in that country is yet to make the results official. But already the leader of the coalition, who was supported by the current president, Macky Sall, has considered defeat. And Amadou Bataking indicated that he has congratulated the leader or the candidate for the opposition, that is Bassirou Diomaye Faye, and who is supported by the man who had a lot of support in Senegal, who was in prison and was released just before elections. And therefore, I think, again, Senegal demonstrating that it is a solid democracy, even though earlier on, since last year, there were these challenges in terms of the violence, because at that time, the current president, Macky Sall, was trying to postpone elections. But perhaps let's take a listen at what the former South African President Thabo Mbeki said to SABC when we asked him a week ago about the elections in Senegal and what we can expect, emphasizing that Senegal is a shining example in relation to democracy. Here is Senegal going to have a youngest president in Africa, 44 years old. Let's take a listen.
As I was saying to President Macky Sall, really we need to allow this Senegalese people to decide who should become their president, and not have people who can't contest because they're in jail for political reasons. And I'm really very, very proud of him, President Macky Sall, the way he has acted to make sure that indeed Senegal will reaffirm its standing as one of the guarantors of democracy on the continent.
And of course, Sophie, when one thinks about the road to this particular moment, the uncertainty, some of the people on the ground who are hoping that the numbers of high unemployment are going to start coming down. But before we even talk about some of the hopes that the voters will then have, let's talk about, this man who is likely to now be, pronounced once the result, of course, is then made public. Bassirou Diomaye Faye. What do we know about him?
He's a young activist and who enjoyed support of the opposition. But what led to him even getting more support, it was when the other candidate, who is very popular, who was in jail, was released 2 weeks ago. And he decided to support him. And therefore, when they worked together in the past 8 days, actually, they were able to get more support. And therefore, it speaks to the youth on the continent. They form a largest part of the population. And in different countries, they are a majority. And therefore, the vote of the youth is beginning to make impact. You know that they are mostly affected in terms of poverty, unemployment, and the challenges countries are facing on the continent. And therefore, they have decided, young people, that they are not going to sit down and just moan. They are going to be involved in bringing changes in respective countries. It happened in Kenya, where they supported the current President Ruto. Unfortunately, they are now disappointed. They did the same in Zambia, supporting the current President Hishelema. They did the same supporting the Prime Minister of Lesotho. So that vote, or the voters, particularly the young people, are beginning to say, we have to pave our own destiny, and this is our continent, and we are the future. And the elections are beginning to show that strong message from young people on the continent.
Quite a significant story around the continent, this, especially when you think about how the Senegalese had anxiously waited for this particular moment, and their democracy tested in a, in a continent that has also seen some coups, and others were watching to see if they will do what the former president had to say, especially saying that they're quite one of those exemplary countries when it comes to stability and their democracy, wanting to see if this is going to be carried forward. So it's going to be interesting to see then when the official announcement comes and how it's received on the ground by those many young people who are hoping that things change for them. But Sophie, thank you so much for bringing us that update.